If you can't handle me sleeping with the CEO and your friends, then leave. They're real men. Not impotent, my wife snapped. I smiled coldly. As you wish. The next morning, my three friends, my wife and her CEO landed in the ER with matching symptoms. Then the doctor entered the room. Guys, this is hard to say, but you know what's funny about loyalty? It's like buying insurance for a house that's already burning down. You keep paying premiums, thinking you're protected, while the flames are literally licking at your ankles. My name is Michael Harland, and at 36 years old, I'd spent the better part of my adult life believing that loyalty was the golden ticket to a decent existence. Turns out, I was about as wrong as a GPS trying to navigate the Bermuda Triangle. For 8 years, I'd been working sanitation for the city of Chicago. Yeah, I know what you're thinking, glamorous, right? Nothing says living the dream, like emptying trash cans at 5 a.m. while dodging used condoms and half-eaten pizza slices that probably violated several health codes. But here's the kicker that nobody knew, not even my wife. While I was collecting garbage by day, I was quietly building a crypto fortune that would make most Wall Street bros weep into their overpriced lattes. See, back in 2015, when Bitcoin was cheaper than a decent bottle of wine, I started throwing every spare dollar I could scrape together into various cryptocurrencies. While everyone else was laughing at digital monopoly money, I was studying charts, reading white papers, and basically becoming a financial ninja in my spare time. The beauty of being invisible, which, let's face it, is exactly what you become when you're wearing a city sanitation uniform, is that nobody pays attention to what you're doing with your money. They just assume you don't have any. By 2023, my portfolio was sitting pretty at around $4 million. Not bad for a guy whose job title officially read Waste Management Technician, huh? But did I go around bragging about it? Did I buy a Ferrari and start acting like some crypto bro douchebag? Hell no. I kept my mouth shut, drove my beat-up Honda Civic, and continued living like a normal human being. Because that's what loyal people do. They don't rock the boat, they don't show off, and they sure as hell don't make their partners feel insecure about money. Which brings me to my wife, Celeste. Beautiful, ambitious, and with the emotional depth of a puddle in the Sahara Desert. We'd been married for 6 years, and for most of that time, I genuinely believed we were building something together. She was working on her influencer career, because apparently having opinions about skincare routines and posting thirst traps disguised as lifestyle content is a legitimate profession now, while I provided the steady income and emotional support. Classic arrangement, right? The dependable husband holding down the fort while the wife chases her dreams. Except somewhere along the way, chasing dreams became chasing other men's dicks, and apparently I was too stupid to notice. Or maybe I was just too damn loyal to want to see it. The breaking point came on a Tuesday night in March. I remember it was Tuesday because that's trash pickup day in our neighborhood, and I'd just gotten home from a particularly brutal shift involving what I can only describe as a crime scene disguised as a dumpster behind a seafood restaurant. I was tired, I smelled like low tide mixed with regret, and all I wanted was a shower and maybe some leftover Chinese food. Instead, I walked into what felt like an episode of Jerry Springer directed by Satan himself. Celeste was sitting at our kitchen table, phone in hand, looking like she'd just won the lottery and simultaneously discovered the cure for cancer. That should have been my first red flag. Nobody looks that pleased with themselves unless they're about to drop a bomb that would make Hiroshima look like a firecracker. "We need to talk," she said, which in married couple speak translates to "you're about to get emotionally waterboarded, so buckle up, buttercup." I sat down across from her, still in my work clothes, probably leaving a faint aroma of garbage and broken dreams in my wake. "What's up, babe?" She looked me dead in the eye, and I mean dead, like she was staring at a particularly disappointing piece of roadkill, and delivered the line that would change everything. "If you can't handle me sleeping with the CEO and your friends, then leave. They're real men, not impotent." Now, let me pause here for a second to address that last part. Impotent. Really? That was her big finishing move? I mean, if you're going to gut a man like a fish, at least be creative about it. Impotent is what middle schoolers use when they run out of actually hurtful things to say. But the real kicker wasn't the insult itself. It was the casual way she dropped the bomb about sleeping with multiple people I trusted. The CEO, my friends, plural, as in more than one. For about 30 seconds, I just sat there, processing this information like a computer trying to run Crisis on Windows 95. Part of me wanted to ask for clarification. Which friends, exactly? How long had this been going on? Did they have a group chat where they compared notes about my performance in bed? But another part of me, the part that had been quietly building a crypto empire while taking out the trash, recognized this moment for what it really was. An opportunity. See, here's what Celeste didn't understand about loyalty. It's not weakness. It's not being a pushover or a doormat or whatever other furniture-based metaphor she probably used when talking about me to her new boyfriends. Loyalty is strategic patience. It's gathering information, building resources, and waiting for exactly the right moment to make your move. And brother, she had just given me that moment on a silver platter. Instead of yelling, instead of crying, instead of doing any of the dramatic bullshit she was probably expecting, I smiled. Not a happy smile. More like the kind of smile you'd see on a shark right before it turns a surfer into an all-you-can-eat buffet. As you wish, I said, standing up from the table with the kind of calm that probably should have terrified her. But Celeste was too busy basking in what she thought was her moment of triumph to notice that she'd just declared war on someone who'd spent years learning how to be invisible, patient, and ruthlessly efficient. That night, while she was probably texting her new boyfriends about how she'd finally gotten rid of the dead weight, I sat in my home office and began making lists. Not angry, emotional lists, methodical, military precision lists. Names, addresses, schedules, weaknesses, financial situations, social media accounts, business relationships. My military training from my 20s started whispering in the back of my head like an old friend offering advice. Surveillance, documentation, patience, strategy. Celeste thought she was getting rid of a weak, impotent husband. What she'd actually done was unleash someone who'd spent years quietly learning how to wage war in the shadows. And the best part? She had absolutely no idea what was coming. You know that feeling when you're watching a horror movie and the main character decides to investigate the creepy noise in the basement? That moment where you're screaming at the screen, "Don't go down there, you absolute moron." Well, turns out I was living in my own personal horror flick, except instead of a basement full of demons, I had a life full of backstabbing assholes who I'd stupidly considered family. It wasn't just Celeste. Oh no, that would have been too simple, too clean. Like finding out your dentist has been overcharging you versus discovering your entire medical team has been harvesting your organs while you sleep. The betrayal ran deeper than a Kardashian's fake tan, and it involved pretty much every person I'd trusted over the past decade. Let me paint you a picture of my personal Judas collection, starting with Dean Matthews. This guy was supposed to be my brother from another mother, the kind of friend you call when you need help moving a couch or hiding a body. Not that I'd ever actually hidden a body, but you get the metaphor. Dean owned CrossFit Revolution downtown, one of those places where people pay obscene amounts of money to lift heavy things and then post about it on Instagram like they've just discovered fire. I'd met Dean 6 years ago when I was going through what I now recognize as a midlife crisis disguised as a fitness journey. You know the drill. 30-year-old man suddenly realizes he's shaped like a deflated balloon animal and decides to do something about it. Dean was the trainer who helped me transform from guy who gets winded walking upstairs to guy who can actually see his own feet without a mirror. We bonded over shared workouts, weekend barbecues, and what I thought was genuine friendship. Turns out, Dean's definition of brotherhood included screwing my wife behind my back while I was out collecting garbage to pay for the gym membership that was keeping me in shape for her enjoyment. The irony was so thick you could cut it with a protein shake. Then there was Tyler Morrison, my crypto trading buddy who I'd helped get started in the digital currency game back when he thought blockchain was something you used to secure a bicycle. This dude owed me everything, and I mean everything. When he was living in his mom's basement, subsisting on ramen noodles and false hope, I was the one who walked him through his first Bitcoin purchase. I shared my research, my strategies, my hard-earned knowledge about market patterns and trading psychology. Fast forward to 2023, and Tyler was pulling in 6 figures a year trading crypto, living in a downtown loft that probably cost more per month than most people's annual salary. He'd transformed from basement-dwelling neckbeard to slick financial wizard, complete with the kind of designer wardrobe that screams, "I have more money than sense." And how did he thank me for jump-starting his entire career? By joining my wife's little harem while probably using profits from strategies I taught him to buy her expensive gifts. The third musketeer in this circus of betrayal was Malik Rodriguez, a real estate hustler who I'd literally saved from financial ruin 3 years ago. Malik was the kind of guy who could sell ice to Eskimos and somehow make them feel grateful for the privilege. He specialized in flipping houses in up-and-coming neighborhoods, riding the wave of gentrification like some kind of capitalist surfer. But even the smoothest talkers sometimes bite off more than they can chew, and Malik had gotten himself into a situation involving a property deal gone wrong, some very unhappy investors, and what I suspected were connections to people who solved business disputes with crowbars rather than lawyers. When he came to me, desperate and scared, I didn't hesitate to lend him 50 grand from my crypto stash to make his problems disappear. Did I ask for a contract? Nope. Did I demand collateral? Hell no. Because that's what friends do for each other, right? They help without keeping score. They trust without documentation. They believe in each other even when logic suggests otherwise. Malik paid me back within 6 months, plus interest, and I thought that was the end of it. Just a friend helping a friend through a rough patch. What I didn't realize was that I'd apparently purchased a premium membership to the Let's All Bang Michael's Wife Club, with Malik as one of the founding members. And then there was the ringleader himself, Victor Langford, CEO of Apex Fitness Empire, a guy who'd built his fortune selling overpriced gym equipment and supplements to people desperate enough to believe that six-pack abs could be purchased rather than earned. Victor was the kind of man who wore suits that cost more than most people's cars, drove a Lamborghini like it was a civic duty, and treated women like collectible trading cards. He was also Celeste's boss, technically speaking. She'd started working for Apex as a brand ambassador, which as far as I could tell involved posting workout videos and sports bras that could double as dental floss and attending company events where she smiled pretty for investors. It was supposed to be her big break into the influencer world, her chance to build the kind of personal brand that would make her independently wealthy and famous. What I didn't know was that Victor's hiring process apparently included a very thorough orientation period that had nothing to do with company policies and everything to do with his personal entertainment. He saw my wife as just another trophy to add to his collection, another conquest to brag about in whatever rich guy locker rooms he frequented. The worst part? They all knew about each other. This wasn't a case of multiple affairs happening in isolation. This was a coordinated effort, a group project in humiliation. They had group chats where they joked about me, called me the furniture husband, because I was always there but never really noticed. Victor bragged about breaking in my wife like a company car, treating her like some kind of lease vehicle that he could test drive whenever the mood struck. My so-called friends joked about how clueless I was, how I'd never figure out what was happening right under my nose. They made bets about how long it would take me to catch on, shared stories about close calls when I almost walked in on something, laughed about the elaborate lies they had to construct to keep me in the dark. Every message I later discovered felt like a paper cut to the soul, not because they were sleeping with my wife. Honestly, by that point I was more offended by her taste in men than anything else, but because of the casual cruelty, the complete lack of respect, the way they'd turned my trust into entertainment. Dean, who I'd spotted at the gym, who I'd helped through his own relationship problems, who'd been to my house for dinner countless times. Tyler, who owed his entire career to my guidance and support. Malik, who I'd literally saved from financial ruin. And Victor, who'd never met a boundary he wouldn't cross if it meant adding another notch to his designer belt. They thought they were so clever, so sophisticated, pulling one over on the dumb garbage man who was too stupid to see what was happening in his own marriage. They underestimated one crucial thing. Invisible doesn't mean powerless. That night, as I sat in my home office surrounded by evidence of their betrayal, I wasn't thinking about revenge in the traditional sense. I was thinking about justice, about consequences, about teaching some very expensive lessons to people who clearly needed their education updated. Military training had taught me that the best battles are won before the enemy even realizes they're at war. Here's something they don't teach you in marriage counseling. When your entire world implodes, you have two choices. You can either lose your shit like a contestant on a reality TV show, or you can channel your inner Navy SEAL and start planning the most methodical takedown since the Watergate investigation. Guess which route I chose? Instead of rage, I chose precision. Instead of screaming matches and thrown dishes, I went full-on Jason Bourne. Except instead of fighting international assassins, I was collecting evidence on a bunch of idiots who thought they were smarter than the invisible garbage man. My military training, which had been gathering dust in the back of my brain like an old exercise bike, suddenly came roaring back to life with the clarity of a church bell. The Army had taught me 3 fundamental principles that applied perfectly to civilian warfare: surveil, document, wait. It's like the holy trinity of revenge, except instead of salvation, you get the sweet satisfaction of watching your enemies destroy themselves with their own stupidity. First step, surveillance. Now, when most people think surveillance, they picture some guy in a van with binoculars and a thermos full of cold coffee. But modern surveillance is way more sophisticated and infinitely more satisfying. We live in the golden age of digital stupidity, where people document their own crimes and post them on social media like they're applying for awards in the worst human being category. I started with their phones. Not hacking. I'm not some basement-dwelling cybercriminal. I'm talking about good old-fashioned social engineering mixed with the kind of access you get when people trust you enough to leave their devices lying around. Amazing how much incriminating evidence people keep on devices they think are private, especially when those people are arrogant enough to believe they're untouchable. Dean was the easiest target because the guy's password security was about as strong as wet toilet paper. His gym required members to connect to the Wi-Fi, and since I'd helped him set up the network originally, I knew exactly how to monitor traffic. Every text, every photo, every late-night video call with my wife. All of it flowing through systems I had legitimate access to maintain. Tyler was trickier because crypto traders tend to be more paranoid about digital security, but paranoia doesn't help when you're stupid enough to use the same coffee shop Wi-Fi every morning to check your personal accounts. 3 weeks of patient observation, and I had enough screenshots to make a coffee table book titled How to Destroy Your Life in 140 Characters or Less. Malik was practically handing me evidence on a silver platter. The guy was so obsessed with documenting his lifestyle on Instagram that he was essentially providing a real-time itinerary of when and where he was cheating on his girlfriend with my wife. Nothing says criminal mastermind like posting time-stamped photos of yourself outside a hotel you're definitely not supposed to be at. But the real goldmine was their group chat. Oh, sweet Jesus. Their group chat was like Christmas morning wrapped in a birthday party and delivered by unicorns. These geniuses had created a private messaging group where they shared photos, videos, and detailed commentary about their adventures with Celeste. They called it the furniture store, get it? Because I was the furniture husband. Hilarious, right? Really showcasing that Ivy League creativity. In this digital treasure trove of stupidity, Victor bragged about breaking in my wife like a company car, complete with photos that would have made a porn director blush. Dean shared workout videos that definitely weren't focused on proper form. Tyler posted crypto trading tips mixed with intimate details that I really didn't need to know, but was absolutely going to use against him. And Malik? Malik was documenting real estate deals that suddenly made a lot more sense when you realized they involved properties where he was taking my wife for private showings. Every message was another nail in their collective coffin, another piece of evidence that would come in handy when the time was right. They thought they were so clever, so untouchable, sharing their conquest like fraternity brothers comparing notes after a kegger. What they didn't realize was that they were essentially creating a prosecutor's wet dream, a comprehensive record of their own destruction. The beauty of digital evidence is that it's persistent. Delete a message? Doesn't matter. I'd already screenshotted it. Clear your browser history? Too late, buddy. I'd already captured those hotel booking confirmations. Try to cover your tracks? Sorry, but when you're dealing with someone who understands how technology actually works, your amateur hour privacy measures are about as effective as a chocolate teapot. While I was building my evidence portfolio, I was also making physical preparations. I rented a small apartment across town under a business name I'd registered years ago for crypto trading. Nothing fancy, just a basic one-bedroom that could serve as a command center, complete with multiple laptops, backup drives, and enough coffee to fuel a small army. Think of it as my personal war room. Except instead of planning military operations, I was orchestrating the downfall of people who richly deserved what was coming. The apartment also served as storage for equipment I'd need later. Recording devices small enough to hide in plain sight, GPS trackers that could be discreetly attached to vehicles, and surveillance cameras that could be disguised as everyday objects. All perfectly legal to purchase, all completely undetectable when used properly, all devastatingly effective when deployed by someone who actually knew what they were doing. But hardware was only half the equation. The real weapon was going to be human intelligence, and for that, I needed an inside ally. Someone with access to places I couldn't go, someone with skills I didn't have, someone with their own reasons for wanting to see justice done. That's when I remembered Tamara Lee. Tamara was a former medical technician who'd gotten screwed over by the healthcare system in ways that would make your blood boil. She'd been working at Chicago General, pulling night shifts and saving lives, when budget cuts and administrative politics had forced her out of a career she'd trained years for. Now she was working at a coffee shop downtown, serving overpriced lattes to people who made more in a day than she used to make in a month. But here's the thing about Tamara. She owed me a favor. A big one. About 2 years ago, when she was going through her own financial crisis after losing her hospital job, I'd helped her avoid eviction by covering 3 months of rent. Not as a loan, as a gift. Because that's what decent people do when they see someone struggling through no fault of their own. I'd stayed in touch with Tamara, checking in periodically to make sure she was doing okay, never expecting anything in return. Just basic human decency, the kind of behavior that apparently makes you a sucker in today's world. But now, as I sat in my new command center surrounded by evidence of betrayal, I realized that sometimes doing the right thing pays dividends in ways you never expect. Tamara had medical training, access to laboratory equipment through her current job's connections, and most importantly, a legitimate reason to be angry at people who thought they were better than everyone else. She was perfect for what I had in mind. The plan was starting to come together, piece by methodical piece. You know what they say about gift horses and looking them in the mouth? Well, sometimes the universe delivers exactly what you need wrapped up in such a perfect bow that you'd be stupid not to take it. And brother, what Celeste handed me next was like Christmas, my birthday, and winning the lottery all rolled into one beautifully ironic package. It was a Wednesday morning in early April when my darling wife came bouncing into the kitchen like a caffeinated cheerleader who'd just discovered the meaning of life. She was practically vibrating with excitement, clutching her phone like it contained the secrets to eternal youth and unlimited Instagram followers. Which, knowing Celeste, it probably did. "Michael, honey," she said, and I knew immediately that whatever was coming next was going to be either expensive or stupid, possibly both. When your wife starts a sentence with honey in that particular tone, it's like hearing the Jaws theme song. You know something's about to bite you in the ass. "I have the most amazing idea for growing my brand," she continued, completely oblivious to the fact that her brand was currently built on sleeping with half the city's male population. "Victor thinks it would be perfect for Apex Fitness, and all the guys are totally on board." Now, when she said, "all the guys," I knew exactly which guys she was talking about. Dean, Tyler, Malik, and Victor, the founding members of the Let's Screw Michael's Wife Club. But I just smiled and nodded like the supportive husband I was pretending to be, waiting to hear what brilliant scheme they'd cooked up this time. "We're going to launch a men's health awareness campaign," she announced, like she'd just discovered the cure for cancer. "Think about it. It's socially conscious, it's timely, and it's exactly the kind of content that goes viral. We'll do health screenings, educational content, maybe even partner with local hospitals for authenticity." I had to hand it to her. For someone whose idea of medical knowledge came from Googling detox teas and waist trainers, she'd stumbled onto something that was actually socially useful. Men's health awareness was a legitimate cause, something that could genuinely help people while also generating the kind of positive publicity that influencers live for. But here's where it got interesting. As she kept talking, gesticulating wildly with her phone, and occasionally pausing to take selfies to document this creative breakthrough, I realized that she was basically handing me the perfect cover for what I had planned. "Victor's company will sponsor the whole thing," she continued, completely unaware that she was essentially writing my script for me. "Dean's gym will be the location. Tyler's going to handle the social media marketing because he's so good with online engagement, and Malik knows people in the medical field who can help with the actual testing." It was like watching someone build their own gallows while humming a happy tune. Every detail she shared was another piece falling perfectly into place for my master plan. They wanted to do health screenings? Perfect. They wanted medical professionals involved? Even better. They wanted to make it a big public event with lots of documentation and social media coverage? Outstanding. But the real cherry on top came when Celeste added, and of course, I'll be participating too. I mean, we should practice what we preach, right? Plus, it'll be great for the optics, showing that this isn't just about men's health, but about health awareness in general. I swear, if I'd been drinking coffee at that moment, I would have choked on it. Not from surprise, but from trying not to laugh out loud. She was literally volunteering to be included in something that could potentially expose all of them, and she thought it was a marketing strategy. That sounds amazing, babe, I said, putting on my best supportive husband voice. Really innovative. I'm proud of you for thinking of something so meaningful. And I genuinely was proud, in a twisted sort of way. She'd managed to create the perfect scenario for her own downfall without even realizing it. It was like watching someone enthusiastically dig their own grave while live streaming the process for their followers. Over the next few days, I watched as the whole group threw themselves into planning this campaign with the kind of enthusiasm usually reserved for cult activities or pyramid schemes. Dean was excited about showcasing his gym as a health-focused community space. Tyler was already designing social media graphics and planning influencer outreach. Malik was leveraging his real estate connections to find medical professionals who might want to participate. And Victor? Victor was just basking in the glow of what he thought would be another publicity win for Apex Fitness. Meanwhile, I was having daily conversations with Tamara, fine-tuning the details of how we could turn their awareness campaign into something far more educational than they'd bargained for. Tamara still had connections in the medical field, people who owed her favors or respected her enough to help with what she thought was a legitimate health initiative. The beauty of it, Tamara said during one of our planning sessions at her coffee shop, is that we'll be conducting real tests using real equipment. Everything will be completely legitimate from a medical standpoint. We're just going to be very creative about how we interpret and present the results. See, here's something most people don't understand about medical testing. It's all about context and presentation. The same test results can tell very different stories depending on how they're framed, what additional factors are considered, and how the information is communicated to the patient. A skilled medical professional can take perfectly normal results and present them in a way that would make a hypochondriac reach for their emergency Xanax. Not that we were planning to fake anything. That would be illegal, unethical, and completely unnecessary. What we were planning was far more elegant. We were going to give them exactly what they asked for, just with a few additional layers of complexity that they weren't expecting. The Men's Health Awareness campaign was scheduled for the first week of May, giving us about 3 weeks to prepare. 3 weeks to set up equipment, coordinate with medical professionals, and make sure every single detail was perfect. Because when you're dealing with people who think they're smarter than everyone else, you don't get second chances. During those 3 weeks, I watched my wife and her boy toys planning their event with the kind of naive enthusiasm that would have been adorable if it weren't so misguided. They created promotional materials, reached out to local media, and even managed to get some legitimate health organizations to endorse the campaign. They thought they were building something meaningful, something that would enhance their reputations and advance their careers. What they were actually doing was constructing the stage for their own very public humiliation. And the best part? They were doing all the work themselves. I just had to sit back, smile supportively, and make sure everything went exactly according to plan. The irony was so perfect it was almost artistic. If you've ever been to a high school reunion, you know that special kind of energy that fills the air when people are trying way too hard to impress each other. Now imagine that same energy. But instead of, look how successful I am 20 years later, it's look how healthy and socially conscious I am while secretly screwing my friend's wife. That was the vibe at CrossFit Revolution on the morning of May 6th, the day that would go down in my personal history as the day everything went according to plan. The gym had been transformed into what looked like a legitimate medical facility, crossed with a social media content creator's wet dream. Tamara and her team had set up testing stations that would have made a real hospital jealous. Blood pressure monitors, portable blood testing equipment, body composition analyzers, and enough medical-looking machinery to convince anyone that this was the real deal. Which, technically, it was. We weren't cutting any corners on the actual medical side of things. We were just being very creative about what we planned to do with the results. Dean arrived first, because of course he did. The man couldn't resist being the center of attention at his own gym, strutting around in shorts that were probably more expensive than most people's rent, flexing for anyone with a camera or pulse. He'd spent the better part of the previous week promoting the event on social media, posting shirtless workout videos with captions about taking charge of your health and being a real man means getting tested. The irony was so thick you could have used it as protein powder. "Bro, this is going to be epic," he kept saying to anyone who would listen, flexing his biceps every few words like he had some kind of neurological condition that required constant muscle contractions. "We're really making a difference here, you know? Changing lives, raising awareness, being leaders in the community." Yeah, Dean, real leaders. The kind who sleep with their friends' wives while preaching about integrity and brotherhood. Tyler showed up about 20 minutes later, looking like he'd stepped out of a crypto trading magazine. If such a thing existed, which honestly, it probably does. Designer everything, perfectly styled hair, and that particular brand of confidence that comes from making obscene amounts of money doing something most people don't understand. He immediately started taking selfies with the medical equipment, probably planning to post them later with captions about investing in health and diversifying your portfolio of wellness. "This is brilliant marketing," he told Celeste, who was practically glowing from the attention. "The engagement metrics on this are going to be insane. I'm seeing brand partnerships, sponsored content, maybe even a documentary deal if we play this right." Malik rolled up fashionably late, because punctuality is apparently for poor people. He was driving his latest acquisition, a Tesla Model S that he'd probably bought with profits from real estate deals that may or may not have been entirely legal. The man had a gift for making everything look effortless, from his perfectly pressed casual wear to the way he seemed to glide rather than walk. He was already working the room before he'd even officially arrived. Shaking hands and networking like this was a chamber of commerce meeting instead of a health screening. "Michael, my man," he called out when he spotted me cleaning equipment in the background. "This whole thing is incredible. Your wife is a genius, absolutely brilliant. We should talk about doing something similar for some of my property developments, community health initiatives, you know? Great for property values and public relations." I smiled and nodded, playing my role as the supportive background husband while internally calculating exactly how much his life was about to change. "Yeah, she's really something special," I replied, which was technically true, just not in the way he thought I meant it. And then Victor made his grand entrance, because the man couldn't just arrive somewhere. He had to make an event out of it. Lamborghini purring like a mechanical cat, custom suit that probably cost more than most people's annual salary, and that particular aura of entitlement that comes from having enough money to believe that normal rules don't apply to you. He stepped out of his car like he was walking a red carpet, immediately drawing the attention of everyone in the vicinity. "Ladies and gentlemen," he announced to no one in particular, "the future of fitness and health awareness has arrived." Because apparently humility was another thing he couldn't afford despite his considerable wealth. Victor spent the next 30 minutes glad-handing everyone in sight, taking photos with community leaders who'd shown up for the event, and generally acting like he'd personally invented the concept of preventive healthcare. He kept one arm around Celeste whenever possible, and I had to admire his balls, openly claiming my wife in front of me while I was standing right there. It takes a special kind of arrogance to be that blatant about your affairs. But the real performance art began when the actual testing started. Dean was first up, naturally, stripping down to his underwear for body composition analysis while flexing for the cameras that Celeste was using to document everything. "Gotta show people that fitness isn't just about looking good," he said, while absolutely showing off how good he looked. "It's about being healthy inside and out." Tyler was next, joking with the medical technicians about how his high-stress trading lifestyle probably meant he needed to pay extra attention to his cardiovascular health. "Money's no good if you're not alive to spend it," he quipped, which would have been funnier if he weren't actively contributing to my stress levels by sleeping with my wife. Malik treated his screening like a business networking opportunity, chatting up everyone in Scrubs about potential real estate investments in the medical field. "Healthcare real estate is the future," he kept saying. Always going to be demand, always going to be profits. It's recession-proof. And Victor? Victor turned his entire screening into a photo opportunity, making sure every angle was captured for future marketing materials. This is what leadership looks like, he announced to Celeste's camera. A CEO who doesn't just talk about employee wellness, but demonstrates it personally. Meanwhile, I moved through the background like a ghost, wiping down equipment, restocking supplies, and making sure everything ran smoothly. The invisible man doing invisible work while the stars of the show preened and posed for their audience. No one paid attention to the janitor making sure their precious event didn't fall apart, which was exactly how I wanted it. Because while they were busy performing for the cameras and stroking their own egos, I was watching every detail, noting every interaction, and making sure that everything went exactly according to the plan that none of them knew existed. The best part? They were having so much fun, so convinced of their own brilliance and importance, that they had no idea they were participating in their own downfall. It was beautiful to watch. You know that moment in a disaster movie when everything seems fine, people are going about their business, and then suddenly the ground starts shaking? That's exactly what the next 72 hours felt like, except instead of earthquakes or alien invasions, it was watching 5 people's lives implode in real time while I maintained the perfect poker face of a concerned, supportive husband. The results started rolling in on Thursday morning, exactly 48 hours after the screenings. Tamara had done her job with the precision of a Swiss watchmaker, and the medical lab she'd partnered with was as legitimate as they come. Everything was completely by the book, professionally handled, and absolutely devastating in its implications. Dean was the first domino to fall, which was poetic justice considering he'd been the first to volunteer for testing. His phone rang at 8:47 a.m. while he was in the middle of leading a CrossFit class, barking orders at a group of soccer moms who were paying premium prices to be yelled at while lifting heavy objects. I know the exact time because I happened to be in the gym, doing my usual maintenance work on the equipment, when his entire world came crashing down. This can't be right, he said into his phone, his voice carrying across the gym with the kind of panic that makes everyone stop what they're doing. There has to be some kind of mistake. I'm healthy. I eat clean. I work out 6 days a week. I take supplements worth more than most people's grocery budgets. The class he'd been teaching just stood there holding their kettlebells, watching their supposedly invincible trainer turn the color of week-old lettuce. Dean kept pacing around in circles, running his free hand through his perfectly styled hair while repeating variations of "this can't be happening," like a broken record stuck on the world's worst song. "I need to come in immediately," he finally managed. "Can we run the tests again? Maybe there was contamination, or a mix-up, or—" His voice trailed off as whatever the person on the other end was telling him apparently confirmed his worst fears. By the time Dean hung up, half his morning class had already gathered their stuff and left. Nothing kills the motivation for a workout quite like watching your trainer have what appears to be a medical emergency in real time. The remaining soccer moms were whispering among themselves, probably wondering if whatever Dean had was contagious and whether they should demand refunds. Tyler got his call about an hour later, while he was in the middle of a live-stream trading session from his downtown loft. I wasn't there to witness it personally, but thanks to the magic of social media and Tyler's habit of broadcasting his entire life online, I got to watch the whole meltdown from the comfort of my own home. One minute he was explaining cryptocurrency market trends to his audience with his usual cocky confidence, gesturing at multiple monitors displaying charts that looked like modern art created by caffeinated spiders. The next minute, his phone rang, and his face went from master of the universe to deer caught in headlights, faster than a Tesla in ludicrous mode. "I'm sorry, folks," he stammered to his camera, his usual smooth delivery replaced by the verbal equivalent of a car with engine trouble. I have to end the stream early today." But Tyler being Tyler, he forgot to actually end the stream. So his audience got to watch him pace around his apartment, pale and sweating, having what sounded like the exact same conversation Dean had earlier. The chat was going crazy with speculation, everything from Tyler's having a breakdown, to "this is viral marketing for a new crypto coin," to "someone call 911, he looks like he's dying." By the time Tyler remembered he was still broadcasting and cut the feed, Clips of his meltdown were already making their way around crypto Twitter with hashtags like #TylerDown and #CryptoMeltdown. The internet moves fast when there's drama to be consumed. Malik's world started crumbling around noon, right in the middle of what was supposed to be a high-stakes real estate closing. He was at some upscale law office downtown, probably wearing a suit that cost more than most people's cars, when his phone buzzed with the call that would change everything. I found out about this one secondhand through the Real Estate Gossip Network, which moves faster than CNN breaking news when there's juicy drama to share. Apparently, Malik excused himself from the conference room to take what he thought would be a quick call, only to return looking like he'd seen his own ghost. "Gentlemen, I apologize," he reportedly told the room full of lawyers, investors, and other real estate vultures. "There's been a family emergency. We'll need to reschedule." Except there was no family emergency, unless you count Malik's life falling apart as a family crisis, which I suppose it technically was. The deal he walked away from was worth 7 figures, and in the real estate world, you don't walk away from 7-figure deals unless someone's literally dying or you're about to be arrested. Victor's call came last, at 2:30 p.m., while he was in the middle of a board meeting at Apex Fitness headquarters. This I know because Celeste was there for some kind of brand ambassador photo shoot, and she came home that evening with all the details, completely oblivious to the bigger picture she was painting. "It was so weird," she told me over dinner, picking at a salad that probably cost more than most people spend on groceries in a week. Victor was in this really important meeting with investors, talking about expansion plans and new franchise opportunities, when his assistant interrupted with some urgent phone call. According to Celeste, Victor tried to play it cool at first, taking the call in his office while the board waited. But whatever he heard on that call hit him like a freight train carrying bad news and personal regret. He came back into the meeting looking absolutely terrible, Celeste continued, completely missing the irony of her choice of words. Pale, sweaty, like he'd seen a ghost or something. He tried to laugh it off, made some joke about needing to pay better attention to his health, but you could tell something was really wrong. The meeting apparently ended early, with Victor making excuses about feeling under the weather and needing to reschedule. The investors left looking confused and probably concerned about their money, while Victor locked himself in his office for the rest of the day. But here's where it gets really interesting. Within hours of getting their individual calls, all 4 of them started experiencing what they described as matching symptoms. Weakness, fever, cold sweats, the kind of physical manifestations that happen when your brain starts believing your body is in serious trouble. It's amazing how powerful the mind-body connection can be when you give it something concrete to worry about. Tell someone they might have a serious health problem, and suddenly every minor ache becomes a potential symptom. Every moment of fatigue becomes evidence of impending doom. By Thursday evening, Dean had closed his gym early, claiming he felt too sick to work. Tyler had canceled all his trading activities and social media appearances. Malik had postponed 3 property showings and a networking event. And Victor had delegated all his meetings to subordinates while he dealt with a personal health matter. The beautiful part was watching them try to reach each other, probably wanting to compare notes or seek reassurance, while simultaneously being too proud or scared to admit what was happening. It was like watching a game of telephone played by people who were all too terrified to actually pick up the phone. And through it all, I maintained my role as the concerned, supportive husband, offering to help Celeste deal with the stress of seeing her friends and business associates going through health scares. The dominoes were falling exactly as planned. There's something deeply satisfying about hospital waiting rooms when you're not the one waiting for bad news. It's like watching a really intense drama unfold in real time. Except instead of Netflix, you're getting front row seats to karma finally cashing some overdue checks. And brother, Friday afternoon at Stark Memorial Hospital was better than any streaming service could ever hope to be. By noon, all 5 of them had collapsed under what their panicked minds had convinced them were life-threatening symptoms. It started with Dean, who'd apparently fainted during what was supposed to be a private training session with one of his wealthier clients. Nothing says professional fitness expert quite like face-planting in front of someone who pays you $300 an hour to tell them how to lift things properly. Tyler was next, collapsing in his downtown loft while frantically Googling his symptoms and probably wondering if his crypto portfolio would survive without him. His neighbor found him hyperventilating on his balcony, convinced he was having some kind of cardiac event. The irony of a guy who spent his days analyzing market volatility being completely unable to handle his own personal crash was not lost on me. Malik's breakdown happened at a Starbucks of all places, which seemed fitting for someone whose entire personality was built around overpriced lifestyle choices. He'd been meeting with a potential client about some high-end property development when he suddenly turned gray and started sweating like he was in a sauna. The client probably thought it was the worst sales pitch in real estate history. Victor, being Victor, managed to make even his collapse dramatic. He was in his office at Apex Fitness, probably staring at himself in one of the many mirrors he'd installed to fuel his narcissism, when he decided he needed immediate medical attention. Instead of calling 911 like a normal person, he had his assistant arrange for a private ambulance because even medical emergencies needed to maintain his image of wealth and importance. And Celeste? My darling wife had worked herself into such a state of sympathetic panic watching her boy toys fall apart that she convinced herself she was experiencing symptoms too. I feel feverish, she kept telling me, despite the thermometer showing a perfectly normal temperature. And weak. And my heart's racing. What if we all caught something at the health screening? What if the equipment wasn't properly sterilized? I played my role perfectly, the concerned husband driving his worried wife to the hospital to get checked out just to be safe. Because that's what supportive spouses do, right? They drop everything to rush their partners to medical facilities when they're convinced they're dying from mysterious illnesses. The emergency room at Stark Memorial was like a reunion from hell when we arrived. Dean was already there, sitting in a wheelchair looking like he'd aged 10 years in 2 days. Tyler was pacing back and forth, still pale but animated enough to be scrolling through his phone, probably checking crypto prices out of habit. Malik was slumped in a corner chair, having what appeared to be a very heated phone conversation with someone about rescheduling his entire week. And Victor? Victor was holding court in the middle of the waiting area, talking loudly to anyone who would listen about how he needed the best doctors available and how money was no object when it came to his health. Because even in a hospital gown, the man couldn't resist trying to establish his superiority over everyone around him. The sight should have broken me. These were people I'd trusted, people I'd considered family, people who'd been part of my life for years. Seeing them scared and vulnerable should have triggered some kind of sympathy response, some residual affection from the relationships we'd once had. Instead, it steadied me like a shot of premium whiskey on a cold day. They looked at each other with a mixture of fear and confusion, probably wondering if this was some kind of cosmic coincidence or if they'd all been exposed to something during the health screening. None of them seemed to suspect that their mysterious illness might be connected to their shared hobby of screwing the same man's wife. The really beautiful part was watching them try to avoid making eye contact with me. Dean kept looking at his shoes like they contained the secrets of the universe. Tyler was suddenly fascinated by whatever was happening on his phone screen. Malik had developed an intense interest in the motivational posters on the hospital walls. And Victor kept checking his expensive watch as if time itself could rescue him from this situation. Only Celeste seemed genuinely confused about why everyone was acting so weird. "Why is everyone being so quiet?" she whispered to me, apparently oblivious to the elephant herd that had taken up residence in the waiting room. "We're all here because we're worried about our health. Shouldn't we be supporting each other? Supporting each other. Right. Because nothing says mutual support quite like a group of men who've been secretly coordinating their affairs with the same woman while mocking her husband in group chats. The tension in that waiting room was thicker than the plot of a soap opera written by someone on a 3-day caffeine bender. You could practically see the guilt radiating off them like heat waves, mixing with their genuine fear about what the doctors were going to tell them. Dr. Patricia Harrison arrived about 20 minutes later, looking like the kind of medical professional who'd seen every possible form of human stupidity and wasn't impressed by any of it. She was carrying a stack of files that I knew contained the test results that would either confirm their worst fears or provide some relief from the psychological torture they'd been putting themselves through. "I need to speak with all of you," she announced, her voice carrying the kind of authority that made everyone in the waiting room sit up straighter. "About your test results from the health screening." The silence that followed was so complete you could have heard a pin drop in the next county. 5 people holding their breath, waiting to hear whether their lives were about to change forever, while I sat there in my maintenance uniform, still playing the role of the invisible husband who just happened to be in the wrong place at the wrong time. Dr. Harrison looked around the room, making eye contact with each of them in turn. I have to say, this is unusual. In 20 years of practicing medicine, I've never seen results quite like these from a group screening. Dean's hands were shaking. Tyler had gone completely pale. Malik was gripping the arms of his chair like he was trying to prevent himself from floating away. Victor was trying to maintain his usual confident demeanor, but I could see the cracks forming in his facade. And Celeste? She reached over and grabbed my hand, seeking comfort from the husband she'd been betraying for months, completely unaware that I was the architect of this entire situation. Guys, Dr. Harrison continued, her voice taking on the kind of serious tone that medical professionals use when they're about to deliver news that will change everything. This is hard to say, but your results are serious. We need to contact all your partners immediately. The silence that followed was louder than thunder, more deafening than a rock concert, more complete than the vacuum of space. It was the sound of 5 people realizing that their secret world of betrayal and deception was about to become very, very public. None of them dared look at me. You know how they say revenge is a dish best served cold? Well, I discovered that public humiliation is like a 5-course meal served at absolute zero, and I was about to become the chef of the century. The hospital revelation was just the appetizer. The real feast was about to begin, and every single course was going to be more devastating than the last. See, here's the thing about living in the digital age. Privacy is basically a myth, especially when you're dealing with people whose entire identities are built around their public image. These idiots had spent years crafting their online personas, building their brands, cultivating their reputations like precious little gardens of narcissism, which meant they had a lot further to fall when gravity finally decided to do its job. The beauty of my plan wasn't that I had to destroy them. They'd done most of the heavy lifting themselves with their group chats, their documented affairs, and their complete lack of discretion. All I had to do was give their existing stupidity a little push toward the spotlight and let human nature handle the rest. Phase 1 started with health blogs. Nothing gets people's attention quite like the suggestion that there might be a possible outbreak brewing, especially when it involves recognizable local figures. I didn't have to lie or exaggerate. I just had to plant the seeds and let people's imaginations run wild with the possibilities. I started with FitChicago.com, a popular local wellness blog that covered everything from new gym openings to nutrition trends. An anonymous tip about concerning health screening results from a recent awareness campaign was all it took to get their attention. Within hours, they'd published a carefully worded article about potential health concerns arising from a local fitness event, complete with enough vague details to make people start connecting dots. The article didn't name names. They were too smart for that, but it included enough specifics about the screening location, the timing, and the prominent local fitness personalities involved that anyone with half a brain could figure out who they were talking about. It was like a puzzle that solved itself, and the internet loves nothing more than a good mystery that makes them feel clever for solving it. From there, the whispers spread through Chicago's interconnected social media ecosystem like wildfire in a dry forest. Fitness influencers started sharing the article with cryptic captions about being careful who you trust and the importance of regular testing. Local gossip accounts picked up the thread, adding their own speculation about which prominent figures might be involved. Dean's gym empire started crumbling first, which made sense considering his entire business model was built around people trusting him with their physical well-being. When you're in the fitness industry, any suggestion of health problems is basically professional suicide. His morning classes went from packed to empty overnight, with members suddenly discovering urgent reasons why they needed to cancel their memberships. The cancellations started trickling in on Saturday, then became a flood by Monday. His premium personal training clients, the ones paying $300 an hour for the privilege of being yelled at by someone with perfect abs, were suddenly too busy to schedule sessions. Corporate wellness contracts that had taken months to negotiate were being reviewed by legal departments who'd gotten nervous about liability issues. By Wednesday, CrossFit Revolution looked like a ghost town with expensive equipment. Dean was hemorrhaging money faster than a hedge fund during a market crash, watching his carefully built fitness empire dissolve because people were suddenly very concerned about what they might catch at his gym. Tyler's crypto empire faced a different kind of collapse, but it was equally spectacular. In the trading world, confidence is everything, and confidence is exactly what Tyler lost when his clients started questioning whether they wanted their financial advisor to be someone who might be dealing with mysterious health issues. Because if you can't manage your own physical well-being, how can you be trusted to manage other people's money? His live streaming audience started dropping off as rumors circulated about his erratic behavior and concerning health problems. Crypto Twitter, which had once hung on his every market prediction, suddenly found his analysis less compelling when it was coming from someone who might be facing serious medical issues. Investment clients began pulling their funds, citing concerns about advisor stability and risk management protocols. The beautiful irony was that Tyler's own obsession with documenting his life on social media had provided all the evidence people needed to fuel the speculation. Screenshots of his panicked livestream meltdown were circulating with captions like, "This you, bro?" and "Maybe stick to trading medical stocks instead." Malik's real estate empire faced the most brutal collapse because his entire business was built on personal relationships and trust. In real estate, your reputation is your currency, and Malik's reputation was getting shredded faster than documents at Enron headquarters. Property developers who'd once competed for his attention were suddenly taking his calls less frequently. Potential buyers started choosing different agents, citing concerns about recent developments and wanting to work with someone more stable. The seven-figure deal he'd walked away from? Word had gotten out about that, and in the real estate world, walking away from major deals without explanation is the kind of behavior that makes people question your judgment, your finances, and your overall stability. Other agents started circulating stories about Malik's unprofessional behavior and questionable decision-making. His carefully cultivated image as the smooth-talking, always successful property mogul was being replaced by whispers about health problems, poor judgment, and possible financial difficulties. In an industry where perception is reality, Malik was watching his entire career circle the drain in real time. But Victor faced the most spectacular destruction because he had the furthest to fall. Apex Fitness wasn't just his company. It was a publicly traded corporation with shareholders, board members, and investors who got very nervous when their CEO became the subject of health-related speculation. The stock price started dropping on Tuesday when the first health blog articles appeared. By Thursday, financial news outlets were reporting on uncertainty surrounding Apex Fitness leadership and investor concerns about executive health disclosures. The company's social media accounts, which had once featured Victor prominently in their marketing, suddenly seemed to be scrubbing his image from their content. Board members were asking uncomfortable questions about whether Victor had disclosed any health issues that might affect his ability to lead the company. Investors were wondering if they should be concerned about the long-term stability of their investment. Corporate partners were reviewing their relationships with Apex Fitness, using the kind of corporate speak that translates to, "We're looking for reasons to distance ourselves from this potential disaster." And then there was Ashley North, Celeste's biggest rival in the influencer world, who smelled blood in the water and moved in for the kill with the precision of a social media shark. Ashley had been waiting for years for an opportunity to take down her competition, and the health screening scandal was like Christmas morning wrapped in a birthday present and delivered by unicorns. Her expose video, titled "Fake Influencer, Fake Authenticity: The Truth About Celeste Harland," was a masterpiece of social media destruction. 23 minutes of carefully researched content that connected all the dots between the health screening, the mysterious illness, and what Ashley had somehow discovered about Celeste's relationship with multiple prominent local figures. The video went viral faster than a pandemic, racking up hundreds of thousands of views in the first 24 hours. Comments sections exploded with speculation, screenshots, and the kind of gleeful destruction that only the internet can provide. Brands that had once competed for Celeste's endorsement were suddenly sending termination emails, citing brand safety concerns and alignment with company values. Her follower count plummeted as people unfollowed in droves, many leaving comments about being disgusted and betrayed by someone they'd trusted for lifestyle advice. Sponsored posts were being deleted, collaboration offers were being rescinded, and her carefully built influencer empire was collapsing faster than a house of cards in a hurricane. The best part? I didn't have to do anything except watch. They'd created the perfect storm for their own destruction, and all I'd done was give it a gentle push in the right direction. There's a special kind of satisfaction that comes from watching someone try to screw you over, only to discover they've actually screwed themselves. It's like watching a magician attempt a disappearing act and accidentally making their own career vanish instead. And when Celeste walked into that divorce attorney's office thinking she was about to pull the con of the century, she had no idea she was actually stepping into a trap I'd been building for years. The divorce papers arrived on a Tuesday morning in late May, delivered by some kid who probably made minimum wage plus mileage to ruin people's days professionally. Celeste had been staying at her sister's place since the whole health screening scandal exploded, probably plotting what she thought would be her brilliant escape strategy. The papers were thick, official-looking, and absolutely dripping with the kind of legal arrogance that comes from lawyers who charge by the syllable. Her attorney was Marcus Webb, one of those sharks who advertises on late-night TV with commercials that basically say, "Going through a divorce? Let us help you destroy your spouse's life while we get rich." Webb had a reputation for being ruthless, expensive, and exactly the kind of guy you'd hire if you wanted to squeeze every possible penny out of a marriage before setting it on fire. The petition was a work of fiction that would have made Stephen King jealous. According to Celeste's version of our marriage, I was an emotionally distant husband who had failed to provide adequate financial support, while she contributed significantly to the household through her successful business ventures. Her successful business ventures. Right. Because posting thirst traps on Instagram while sleeping with half of Chicago's male population is apparently the modern equivalent of building a Fortune 500 company. But here's where it gets really entertaining. Celeste and her lawyer had done their homework, or at least they thought they had. They knew I worked for the city sanitation department, they knew my official salary, and they'd probably calculated exactly how much alimony they could squeeze out of me based on those numbers. What they didn't know was that their research was about as thorough as a middle school book report written 5 minutes before class. See, the beautiful thing about building wealth quietly is that when people think they know everything about your finances, they usually know absolutely nothing. Celeste had spent 6 years married to me without ever bothering to dig deeper than my paycheck stubs and W-2 forms. She had no idea about the crypto portfolio that had grown from a few $1,000s into something that would make most divorce attorneys weep tears of pure joy. But here's the kicker, and this is where years of strategic planning finally paid off. Every single one of those crypto investments predated our marriage. Every Bitcoin purchase, every Ethereum transaction, every altcoin gamble I'd made was documented with timestamps that showed I'd acquired them months or even years before Celeste, and I said, I do. In divorce law, there's this beautiful concept called separate property, assets that belong to one spouse individually rather than being part of the marital estate. And thanks to my obsessive record-keeping and conservative approach to financial planning, my crypto fortune was about as separate as property could get. The first hint that Celeste's grand plan might have some flaws came when I showed up to the initial divorce proceedings with Eva Darnell as my attorney. Eva wasn't just any lawyer. She was the lawyer, the kind of legal predator who made other divorce attorneys wake up in cold sweats. She'd built her reputation by dismantling the cases of overconfident spouses who thought they could outsmart the system. Eva was a woman who looked like she could have been a librarian, complete with sensible shoes and reading glasses, but fought like a cage fighter who'd been raised by wolves and trained by Navy SEALs. She had this way of speaking very quietly that made everyone in the room lean forward to hear her. And then she'd deliver legal haymakers that left opposing counsel wondering what the hell had just happened. When Eva walked into that conference room carrying 3 bankers' boxes full of documentation, I could see Webb's confidence start to crack like cheap paint in the sun. Celeste was sitting next to him looking smug and satisfied, probably imagining all the ways she was going to spend my money once the divorce was finalized. Before we begin, Eva said in that deceptively soft voice of hers, I think there are some financial disclosures that might affect the proceedings. She opened the first box and started laying out documents like she was dealing cards in the world's most expensive poker game. Cryptocurrency exchange records, blockchain transaction histories, wallet addresses, tax documentation going back 8 years, a complete financial archaeology of my digital investments. Webb's face went through about 6 different expressions in the span of 30 seconds, starting with confusion and ending somewhere around, "Oh shit, we fucked up big time." Celeste just looked confused, probably wondering why anyone would need that much paperwork to discuss a garbage man's finances. "As you can see," Eva continued, still using that librarian voice that somehow made everything sound more ominous, "Mr. Harland has been quite successful with his cryptocurrency investments. Investments that, as the timestamps clearly show, were initiated and maintained entirely prior to the marriage." The number Eva wrote on the whiteboard for $2 million hit that conference room like a financial asteroid. Webb actually choked on his coffee, which would have been funny if I weren't too busy enjoying the look of absolute shock on Celeste's face. For the first time in our entire relationship, my wife was completely speechless. Her mouth was hanging open like she was trying to catch flies, and her eyes had gone wide enough to use as satellite dishes. The woman who'd spent months calling me impotent and mocking me as the furniture husband was suddenly realizing that the furniture was worth more than everything she'd ever owned combined. "This has to be a mistake," Webb stammered, rifling through his own paperwork like he might find some magic document that would make my crypto fortune disappear. "Our investigation showed that Mr. Harland works in sanitation and earns approximately $55,000 annually." "Mr. Harland does indeed work in sanitation," Eva replied, pulling out more documentation. "He also happens to be a rather astute investor who had the foresight to diversify his portfolio into digital assets before they became mainstream. Assets that, as separate property, will not be subject to division in these proceedings." The rest of the meeting was like watching someone try to fight their way out of quicksand. Webb kept grasping for legal strategies that might give Celeste some claim to my crypto wealth, while Eva systematically destroyed each argument with the precision of a surgeon removing cancerous tissue. "Community property? Nope. All acquired before marriage." "Marital contributions to growth? Nice try. All gains were from market appreciation and my individual trading decisions." "Commingling of assets? Not even close. I'd kept everything completely separate." But Eva wasn't done. The second box contained documentation of Celeste's own financial situation, and it painted a picture that was about as pretty as a dumpster fire in a sewage treatment plant. Credit card debt, unpaid business expenses, tax liabilities from her influencer income. Turns out my successful businesswoman wife was actually drowning in debt she'd been hiding from me. Additionally, Eva said, pulling out the final stack of papers, "There's the matter of Ms. Harland's recent loss of income due to her terminated brand partnerships and canceled sponsorship agreements. Given her current financial obligations and lack of steady employment, she may actually owe Mr. Harland spousal support rather than the other way around." The silence in that room was so complete you could have heard a pin drop in another zip code. Celeste looked like she'd been hit by a truck carrying bad news and driven by karma itself. Webb was staring at his paperwork like it might spontaneously combust and save him from this professional embarrassment. When we finally walked out of that conference room, Celeste's grand plan had been reduced to ash, and her lawyer looked like he wanted to find a new career in something less stressful, like bomb disposal or lion taming. The final divorce decree was signed 6 weeks later. Celeste walked away with exactly what she'd brought into the marriage, which, as it turned out, was a whole lot of debt and a rapidly declining social media presence. Justice, as it turned out, had a sense of humor after all. You know that feeling when you finally take off shoes that have been pinching your feet all day? That moment when the pressure releases and you realize you'd forgotten what comfort actually felt like? That's exactly what freedom tasted like 6 months after the divorce was finalized, sitting in my new downtown loft, watching the Chicago skyline light up like a circuit board against the October evening sky. The apartment was everything my old life wasn't. Clean lines, modern furniture, and absolutely zero traces of the man I used to be. No more hiding in plain sight. No more pretending to be less than I was. No more swallowing my pride, while people I trusted stuck knives in my back. The place screamed success in a way that was subtle but unmistakable, like a Rolex that doesn't need to show off because everyone already knows what it is. My phone had been buzzing nonstop for weeks with messages from Celeste. The notifications had become like background noise, a constant reminder of how completely the tables had turned. Each message was more desperate than the last, evolving from angry demands to pathetic pleas like some kind of reverse character development arc. Michael, we need to talk. This is ridiculous. You can't just ignore me forever. We were married for 6 years. I know I made mistakes, but this is crazy. Call me back. Please. I'm sorry. I need you. Michael, please. I'm really struggling here. I just need someone to talk to. I don't know what to do. Everything's falling apart. Please just call me. Each message got a one-way ticket to digital hell, deleted faster than a crypto scam coin disappearing from someone's wallet. There's something deeply satisfying about having the power to make someone's desperate attempts at communication simply vanish into the void. For years, I'd been the one reaching out, trying to connect, attempting to save a marriage that was already dead in the water. Now the roles were reversed, and I was discovering that ignoring someone can be its own form of poetry. The beautiful thing about karma is that it doesn't need your help once it gets rolling. Dean's gym had closed permanently in September, unable to recover from the mass exodus of members and the mountain of debt he'd accumulated trying to keep the doors open. Last I heard, he was working at a chain fitness center in the suburbs, probably making about as much per hour as a decent barista. From "Bro, I'm building an empire," to "Would you like to upgrade your membership to include towel service?" in less than 6 months. Tyler's crypto empire had imploded so spectacularly that it became a cautionary tale in trading circles. His YouTube channel, which once had hundreds of thousands of subscribers hanging on his every market prediction, was now a digital ghost town with comments disabled and upload schedules that had become more irregular than Chicago weather. Word through the grapevine was that he'd moved back in with his parents, probably explaining to his mother why her basement was suddenly full of expensive computer equipment and crushed dreams. Malik's real estate career had cratered harder than the housing market in 2008. The man who used to flip properties like pancakes was now working for someone else's agency, probably showing studio apartments to college kids and pretending he wasn't dying inside every time he had to explain why the kitchen was also the bedroom and the bathroom. His Tesla had been repossessed, his designer wardrobe had probably been sold on eBay, and his Instagram account had gone from lifestyle inspiration to cautionary tale. Victor's fall had been the most spectacular, partly because he'd had the furthest to drop and partly because corporate destruction always happens in slow motion, giving you time to really savor each devastating detail. Apex Fitness stock had tanked so hard that the company became a business school case study in how CEO scandals can destroy shareholder value. The board had forced him out in a move they described as pursuing new leadership direction, which in corporate speak translates to, "We're throwing this guy under the bus and backing up to make sure we got him." Last I'd heard, Victor was driving for one of those luxury rideshare services, probably listening to passengers complain about their jobs while remembering when he used to have people complaining about their jobs to him. There's probably some Greek tragedy-level irony in a former CEO chaffering around the kind of executives he used to network with at country club events. But the most interesting twist in this whole saga came from the last person I'd expected, Ashley North. The influencer who delivered the killing blow to Celeste's career had apparently taken notice of the quiet man in the background who'd somehow emerged from the wreckage not just unscathed, but significantly more interesting than anyone had realized. The dinner invitation had arrived via DM 3 weeks ago. Casual, but clearly intentional. "Hey Michael, I know this might seem random, but I'd love to take you to dinner sometime. I think we might have more in common than people realize." Ashley North wanting to have dinner with me was like discovering that the popular girl from high school had suddenly developed an interest in the quiet kid who used to fix computers in the library. The irony was delicious. The woman who'd helped destroy my wife's career was now apparently interested in getting to know the husband Celeste had thrown away like yesterday's garbage. Our first dinner had been at some upscale place downtown, the kind of restaurant where the menu doesn't have prices and the waiters speak in hushed tones like they're discussing state secrets. Ashley had shown up looking like she'd stepped off a magazine cover, but the conversation had been surprisingly real, surprisingly deep, surprisingly free of the superficial bullshit that I'd grown to expect from people in her world. "You know," she'd said over dessert, "I spent months researching Celeste's life for that expose, and the more I learned about you, the more I wondered how someone that smart had stayed invisible for so long." Smart. Not impotent, not weak, not furniture. Smart. It was like hearing a foreign language that I'd forgotten I could speak. We'd had 3 more dinners since then, each one feeling less like 2 people getting to know each other and more like 2 people recognizing something they'd been missing without realizing it. Ashley was sharp, funny, and refreshingly honest about the fact that her interest in me had started as curiosity about the mystery man behind the scandal and evolved into something that felt a lot more real than anything I'd experienced in years. Tonight was dinner number 5, at a place Ashley had picked specifically because it was somewhere we can actually talk without people trying to eavesdrop for gossip content. The woman understood the value of privacy, which was something I'd learned to appreciate in ways I never thought I would. As I got ready to leave the apartment, I caught my reflection in the bathroom mirror and had to do a double take. The man looking back at me wasn't the invisible husband, the quiet janitor, or the guy people called impotent behind his back. It was someone who looked confident, successful, and completely comfortable in his own skin. The transformation hadn't happened overnight. It had been building for months, layer by layer, like sediment forming rock under pressure. Each deleted message from Celeste, each news update about my former friends continued downward spirals. Each conversation with Ashley that felt like connecting with an actual human being instead of performing for an audience. All of it had contributed to this version of myself that I was still getting used to. Walking out of that apartment, heading to dinner with a woman who was interested in the real me rather than some fantasy version she'd constructed, I realized that revenge hadn't been about destruction at all. It had been about truth. About forcing people to face the consequences of their choices. About refusing to be invisible anymore. About finally becoming the person I'd always been underneath all the loyalty and patience and quiet endurance. They destroyed themselves. I'd just handed them the mirror to see what they'd become. And for the first time in years, I was looking forward to what came next.